The afternoon sun hung languidly in the sky, a yellow jewel glittering through the clouds. Soft breezes swept through the busy marketplace, fluttering the soft creamy petals of the flower stall I stood beside, gifting me with their perfume. I saw him then, from the corner of my eye, as he cheerfully bantered with the cashier in the next stall. That chiseled, stubbled jaw, the laugh lines that crinkled around his eyes when he smiled, the broad shoulders and muscled arms. Warmth spread through my loins, tickling upwards towards my belly. This is it. This is him. He's the one. I could barely contain myself while I strode towards him. He did a double take in my direction. No doubt my cotton sundress had caught his eye. I knew the way the soft fabric clung to my hips and breasts was alluring. His gaze caressed my body, lingering on the hem of my skirt, which moved with the gentle wind, showing peaks of my upper thighs. That same soft breeze caught in my hair, tangling it before my eyes, hiding my face as I passed him by, throwing a glance and smile over my shoulder. He followed me into the shadowed alleyway behind the market. His hands were rougher than I expected when he gripped my arm. My heart was racing when I felt his hot breath tickling the hairs on my neck. It nearly exploded out of my chest as I plunged the sharp blade of my butterfly knife into his neck, silencing his screams before they could leave his lying mouth. I stripped off my dress, revealing the sports bra and running shorts beneath, simply jogging away from his cooling corpse. No one was the wiser. I love the rush of it all, watching and waiting in the safety of shadows, finding the perfect place to end a life in broad daylight, surrounded by people. The thrill of escape. See, as humans, we have this crazy idea that everything boils down to a set of rules. Life, work, play, death, time, everything. For example, serial killer, noun, a person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive, and typically following a characteristic, predictable behavior pattern. Right there are your rules that you have established for a person of my nature. And according to them, I commit murders based on my own set of rules, my motive, my behavior pattern. Therefore, if you were to discover my motive and pattern, you would be able to hone in on me. I found this intriguing. If I broke said rules, would I become uncatchable? And what of my prey? If they broke the rules, would they escape my clutch? The answer to the first question is yes. No one has ever tied my victims to each other. My list spans the globe, and not a single one has ever been connected. Until this moment when I have confessed my joy, you never knew I existed. The answer to the second question? Well, that's why I'm here. I need help. I think I'm going crazy. The day I killed the lying man was the day I received my next target. That's why the sunny market that I splashed with arterial spray will forever haunt me. It was my last day of boiling satisfaction, the last time I felt joy. all because of the little shit that evades my grasp. I don't pick my prey. I hide under the guise of hitman. I let someone else pick. I don't care what your reason is. I don't care whether it's a man or woman or even a child. I take your money to hide my truth. I hunt down the cheating wife or husband, the bully that blackened your eye and tore a hole in your fragile soul, the political figure that's threatening to rise up and change the world in a way you'd rather it didn't. It can look like a hit, an accident, a natural death, or I can tear them limb from limb with glee. I take my trophy and move on to the next. Oh, in case of buyer's remorse, I even take a piece of you. I add you to my in case of drought list when the jobs dry up and the hunger burns bright. So, when I was asked by a person in red robes to take out a mere child, I nearly frothed at the mouth. No one had ever asked the unspeakable thing, the crowning piece topping my bucket list. Kill this child. I don't care how it's done. Just end his life as soon as possible. He slid me a grainy picture of a tiny boy no more than 2 years old. For the first time in my life, I had questions that filled my mind, drowning out the dark churnings of the thing that lives where my soul should be. How could a tiny little thing like this make a holy man's eyes burn with so much hate? I felt myself erupt into laughter as the robed man shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Can you do what we ask of you? I licked my lips, thirsty for all the obstacles this job would present. Of course. He slid me a packet of cash, heavier than my standard upfront fee. No one must know we have asked this of you. My teeth felt like they were growing, pushing down into sharp points, my lips stretching tight across them. Of course. I've heard whispers that my smile is killer. I had to get lost to find the damn podunk town the child lived in. It was a small, closely knit community with none of the culty air I expected to find. There was no way I could blend in a tiny place as such. I had to make a lair in the dense woods surrounding the town. The thicket I made my home was deep in the heart of it. No way it could be randomly stumbled upon. Humans tend to be rightfully scared of the creatures that live in such places and steer clear of them. I crept up to the house every morning to watch their daily ritual, their set of rules, if you will. The mother always seemed to be up before I arrived. She'd stand on the porch with a cup of hot tea and watch the sun rise. I imagined it was tea. She didn't seem like a coffee person. Just after sunrise, a small white fox would appear, trotting up to the porch. I swear I saw it stand on its hind legs and let itself into the house. Mother must have left the door ajar, and the creature just pushed it open. Foxes don't open doors. Day after day I watched. Morning tea, strange fox. Prepare breakfast. Child number 1 would appear. Mother would wake, pray. Massive Asian man would appear and take older child away, to school I presumed. Mother takes prey to work with her at small store in town. Lunch at small diner. More work. Massive Asian man appears with child number 1. All 4 return to house. Dinner, bed, repeat. For 2 weeks, this was their routine. The morning of the 3rd week, I crept closer to the house. As soon as they had left and were safely out of sight, I snuck in. They didn't even lock the door. Something about that house made the hairs on the back of my neck raise. It was like I, the predator, was being watched. I didn't like it. There were no occult books, no obvious signs of Satan worship. I had assumed the robed man wanted the child dead because of some Antichrist bullshit. But this seemed like a simple family. No outward appearances of anything off. Yet, I still felt unsettled. The familiar swelling of my tongue and gnawing in my belly that I felt when I was getting close to the climax of a kill made my heart stutter. I could feel my nostrils flare as I pushed open the door to Prey's room. I hadn't yet named him. I always give them names. This one eluded me. The window had a simple lock. I flipped it open, preparing for my upcoming entrance. I would have to sneak in while everyone in the house slept. I would be losing part of the thrill, coming in the night like the angel of death. I hated killing during the witching hour. It was no fun. But this child was never alone during the day, and I couldn't keep my hunger at bay for much longer. I nearly came out of my skin when I rounded the hallway to leave this creepy house. A rather large rabbit sat, blocking my way out. Its little white nose twitched at me, and it cocked its head, narrowing its beady little eyes. Atop its head sat a funny mask, as if the creature had pushed it back from its face. It reared up on its hind legs, and my whole body tensed. The rabbit simply sidestepped away from the door, and I found my own feet carrying me across the threshold in a dead sprint. Cold sweat dripped down my back as I heard the door slam shut behind me. What the fuck? I returned to my thicket soaked in perspiration and smelling of fear. Why had that house affected me like that? Standing in their home, I should have felt like the cold, rabid monster I was. Instead, I felt a new feeling, one I had never before felt. I felt as though I was the one falling into a trap, surrendering myself to an end. I became determined to finish this quickly. I usually preferred to take it slow and savor it, but there was just something about this situation that didn't sit right with me. Perhaps it was time to ask those questions that filled me when the robed man had given me prey.
"Is it done?"
he asked me, a tremor of hope in his weathered voice. I knew he secretly smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, but it sounded as though he may have increased his bad habit. Not yet. I have questions.
"We didn't pay you to ask questions."
Doesn't change the fact I need answers before I can proceed. Fabric rustled over the phone. He must have pressed it to his chest. His voice became muffled. He seemed to be questioning someone with him. Ah, I must be on speakerphone.
"Go ahead. You can ask 3.
I could hear the tinny timbre in the slight echo of his voice, definitely on speaker. Who is he?
I thought...
He stuttered, and a low murmur of another voice whispered nonsense in the background.
"I thought you didn't need that sort of information to complete a job."
Fine, let me rephrase. Who does he belong to? I had seen no sign of a father while watching the little family.
"That's complicated. Ask another question."
Why does he need to die? Silence. I sighed to myself. I was going to get nowhere. It was weird. I never asked these questions, but now I felt as though my life might depend on the answers. You can choose to answer the question. I felt the familiar ice coat my throat, hardening it as frustration tinged to anger set in. Or I can get it myself. It'll be less pleasant for you that way.
"Kill the boy if you can."
The voice that filled my ear now sounded of smoke and sin.
"And if you survive?" I'll answer any questions you have.
The line went dead. It was dark out when I made my way to that damn house. To my surprise, the lights were still on, and figures moved behind the pulled curtains. The smoldering red ember of a cigarette and the plume of exhaled smoke froze me in my tracks. Someone was standing in the inky black shadow of the porch. The moon chose that exact moment to peek out from behind the snow-laden clouds, illuminating both myself and the hooded figure. Like me, he was dressed in all black. His head turned as he looked out over the expansive yard. Was he wearing a mask? A long, curved beak-like protrusion poked out from what I thought was a hood. Instead, it seemed the whole of his head was covered in glistening black feathers. A plague doctor mask? What was this? Some kind of costume party? He turned, and I swear he looked right at me before flicking the cigarette out and going into the house. My heart thudded in my chest. I could feel my body heat rising. Excitement filled me, threatening to bubble up and out into a cloud of miasma around me. The cold night air no longer burned me with its icy fingers. Should I come back another night? No, my inner demon screamed in delight. This would be better than killing during the day. Stealing the life from such a fragile being with numerous people in the next room? I trembled in delight at the thought. What shall I name you? I imagined choking the life out of the small boy with my bare hands. I felt positively feverish. I will know your name as I watch the life pass from your eyes. Crouching below the window now, I slowly rose, peeking between the curtains. The window felt deliciously cold through my gloves as I raised the glass a few inches. Voices from the living room were muted by the boy's closed bedroom door. Opening the window further, knowing Prey and I would be alone, I crept in silently. The first thing I noticed was the little green light of a baby monitor on the nightstand beside the crib. I would have to be very quiet. Not that I planned on making a single peep or allowing Prey to. The second thing I noticed was Prey himself. He was standing in his crib, tiny fists clutching the rails, eyes locked on me. He bounced a little and smiled in delight, but remained quiet. Good boy. I stroked his chubby cheek and put a finger to my lips. Shh. He nodded as though he understood, huge eyes peering vainly up at my own, shrouded in darkness. What shall I name you? The cherub? He was extremely cute. I traced my fingers down to his neck. I could almost wrap them completely around the insignificance of it. I looked down into his huge eyes as they widened. His mouth came open as I squeezed harder. To my abject surprise and horror, I watched as those impish lips pulled upwards into a grin and his eyes became pools of black, darker than anything I had seen, and making the room itself seem all too bright. A tiny hand raised up and he touched my chest. Two things happened simultaneously. For the first time, I noticed the dark figure in the rocker by the door. A deep chuckle rumbled from it. The second, well, there was the roar of angry wind, the booming crack of terrible thunder, and I awoke in my thicket. A dream? I could feel a burning on my breast above my rotten heart. I could just barely hear the murmuring of voices, though they spoke in another tongue. Sitting up, my head pounded. I immediately curled into fetal position. I was burning up. Fever dream. Had to be. I crawled from the safety of my thicket and collapsed once more onto the ground. The voices quieted and seemed to disappear. Great. I couldn't have gotten ill at a better time. Feeling myself begin to pass out, I hugged my knees to my chest. I woke the next morning covered in snow and half frozen. After climbing back into the warmth of my thicket and removing my soaked clothes, I prepared to do some more recon. You'll never kill the boy.
You're a fool to even try.
Shut up, I grumbled. I had never doubted myself before.
If at first you don't succeed,
try again, I answered my own inner voices, which laughed in return.
You'll end before you begin.
I covered my ears and rocked myself. I was definitely losing it. Nightmares and now voices? Something was wrong with me. I choked down some Tylenol and awkwardly began putting on clothes. Pulling on a fresh bra, I noticed a strange blistered red mark on my chest. Must have gotten bit by something.
Yes, just ignore that it looks like a tiny handprint.
The voices laughed at me. It was strange. They sounded so foreign in my head, as though they weren't my own self-doubts and inner thoughts. I was watching the house again when a car pulled up the long driveway. A tall man, dark and lanky, exited the car and took a few hesitant steps towards the house. There was something about this man. Beads of sweat broke out across his chestnut skin. He gave off an incredible aura of power. A thrill ran down my spine. He would be fun to hunt. He rolled his shoulders as if to shrug off the strange feeling the house projected and sauntered up to the door. It had to be noon. No one would be home. Maybe a quick kill before they came back. The thought of wrestling through the snow, the stark contrast of dark blood splattering the pure white. A sudden hiss of wind whistled through the trees. No, they'd see the blood. I could knock him out and drag him into the brush. Branches around me groaned as if warning me of danger. Maybe later. I noted his license plates. Not from around here. I'd save him for another day. He left a package on the railing of the porch and backed away, hands held up. It was then I noticed that strange little white fox sitting in the snow. Its tail thumped aggressively as it eyed the stranger. He slowly turned and nearly ran to his car. He couldn't leave fast enough. When I turned back to the house, both package and fox were gone. Maybe someone was home? I seemed to be really slacking. How hadn't I noticed? The voices in my head snickered. So, my dear accessories in crime, I need your help. I think something is wrong with me. The darkness used to be my refuge, but now the voices live there. Could this be the onset of schizophrenia? If it is, how soon before it begins to affect me to the point I can no longer, follow my passion? Does it usually come on this fast? Or could it be like a super flu? I mean, I have been sleeping in the woods in the middle of December. I've heard you guys give great advice. I have to feed the hunger and kill this kid soon, or I could lose control and go on a rampage. I haven't had a good bloodbath in a while, but slaughtering a whole family at once tends to attract too much attention. Any help would be much appreciated.